Welcome to Excruciating Minutia, where we obsess about sports, pop culture, politics, and other unimportant stuff, but mostly sports. I'm Steven, going to be joined shortly by Randy. Randy's not having a good evening, and he's going to go on one of his epic rants. And this may be the first one on a podcast. I'm sure it won't be the last. Hi, Randy.
Hi.
Yeah.
So, as anyone who may have listened to one of our previous episodes knows, I'm a Bears fan. And as we're recording this, we're about maybe 20, 25 minutes out of the Bears-Eagles NFC playoff game. And I guess the first thing I just want to point out is I'm pretty sure that Nick Foles has invested heavily in ice and ice-related products, maybe some cold compresses.
Do you mean like cubed ice, or are you talking about the
cubed ice, blocks of ice?
The immigration and enforcement agency?
No, not that. I'm talking about like real ice, maybe even an iceberg. I think you can buy those, can't you? Or is that like something out of Brewster's Millions where he bought an iceberg? I think.
Yeah, I don't think you can buy an iceberg.
But
you can buy different kinds of ice. You can buy cubed ice, chipped ice,
dry ice. You know why he's going to need all this ice, Steven? Because that contract he signed, if my Roman Catholicism is correct, with the devil is going to land his ass in hell. Because it's about time Nick Foles' little Cinderella run comes to a frickin' end. And it's going to next week, because I'm pretty sure when the Eagles make a visit down to New Orleans, that's not going to be Drew Brees and an inept offense sitting across the field from them, and they're going to get blown the heck out of the Superdome. But unfortunately, we got to live with one more week of Nick Foles in the playoffs. If anyone from Philly is listening to this, my apologies to you, but you got your world title last year. And frankly, you got it out of one of the most ridiculously unforeseen runs by a mediocre quarterback since Joe Flacco did it back in Baltimore's Super Bowl championship season. But at this point, I really have to question on whether or not Foles understands completely the pact he made with the devil and what the repercussions are for his eternal soul, if you believe in that sort of thing. Because I'm not stunned that the Bears lost so much. Obviously, I'm shocked about the way the game ended. And when they flashed the graphic, and I know if you were watching the game, you saw it that Cody Parkey had the second most missed field goals out of kickers in the NFL, and apparently had a very good tendency to bang them off the uprights this season.
Well, he had a game this season where he had four in one game. Against Detroit, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe so.
He had one last week, and this one it was someone I'd never seen before, which is he banked it off the upright and the crossbar on the same kick.
Yes, that's hard to do. And the minute they flashed the graphic up, the minute they had the icing the kicker timeout, which I still, ever since its inception, I hate. I absolutely hate it. It's stupid. Someone would say, oh, it worked today because, you see, he made that first one and he missed the second one, but it's worked in reverse before, and it's nonsense, and it's ridiculous. And that, on top of watching Foles drive for that last touchdown against and I'm putting this in air quotes, the best defense in the NFL, this just aggravated beyond any sense of belief. I had no illusions that the Bears were going to win a Super Bowl this year, but they're a better team than Philly. Every team left in the playoffs is a better team than Philly. Heck, teams that were eliminated in the playoffs this week were better teams than Philly. Philly has, like I said, has no business being in the next round of the playoffs. The Bears basically gave this game away because they couldn't stop Foles when they needed to on that last drive, and they couldn't move the football other than that one drive. They scored the touchdown to take the lead there late. That was literally the only time they were able to really move the football consistently. And as I watched the game with my dad, who's a Bears fan, and And, like I told him, you score 15 points in a playoff game, it's not really your defense's fault. You have to score more than that to win, don't you? 15 wouldn't have won any other game. They would have lost every other game this week, right? No other team won with less than 15 points. So the Bear defense kind of gave it up at the end on that last Philly drive, and they had chances to stop the Eagles, and they didn't. But the Bear offense just didn't show up, and Foles, his numbers on the game, he had 2 touchdowns, he had 2 picks, he threw for 260 some yards, 25 for 40, but those numbers don't really tell the story because he really wasn't even that impressive. There were a number of completions he had where he literally lofted these balls up where I'm like, where's a defender? This looks like an easy pick, and somehow or another there was a receiver there to make the catch, sometimes with nobody in the general vicinity of him. And I keep thinking that a better defense like the Bears are supposed to have should have picked him off more than twice, and the Eagles really shouldn't have even had the 16 points they did. But it's just a whole mixture of things all coming together in one disappointing, heartbreaking, soul-crushing loss in the playoffs that like I said, I kind of knew it. I picked the Bears to win, though I did say they wouldn't cover, but I thought they would win. I thought it would be close. And I said from the get-go, I felt terribly uncomfortable about doing so because I just felt they were doomed. And they were. And by the way, that makes me 0-4 on my picks for the weekend. So when we do this again next weekend for next week's games, as you and I have said before, get to the betting location of your choice and immediately go, obviously, against anything I say, because clearly that's what's going to end up happening. But Nick Foles, enjoy it in hell, buddy, because that's where you're probably going to end up. Because I refuse to believe anything other than a pact with the devil is how you've gotten yourself a Super Bowl ring. I mean, I'm going to throw this out here, and then I'll get your thoughts on the game while I sit here and try to de-stress a little and recompose. Let's say Philly, by some, again, miraculous act of powers beyond our understanding, manages to go on another run, manages to win another Super Bowl with Nick Foles at the helm. What would you do if you were Philadelphia? Is Nick Foles your starting quarterback? Do you bail on Carson Wentz? That's how unlikely and how ridiculous this is. But that would actually have to be a legitimate question you'd have to ask. A back-to-back Super Bowl winning quarterback? Would you move on from him? Relegate him to being the backup again? I can't believe we live in a world where this question is going to need to be answered. Because like I said, we're not making picks for games until later in the week. Let's just get it right out there. I'll be picking the Saints. I'll be picking the Saints to cover. I don't really care what the spread is.
The spread, by the way, is 8.5.
It's 8.5. I'm picking the Saints. I'm picking them to cover. Because the Eagle team that played the Bear team today, if the Saints don't get caught up in Peyton gimmicks and Sean Payton trying to show how much smarter he is than everybody else, and if the Saints just go out there and play as they're capable of playing, they're going to put up a hell of a lot more than the 15 points the Bears did today. And the Eagle defense is, which has a very inexperienced secondary and has issues and problems at home in the dome, are not going to be able to stop Drew Brees and that offense. And I think the Saints defense, which has played better, much better in the second half, can hold Nick Foles and company. That rushing attack of all of 42 yards today. I think if they have to put it in a position where Foles has to win the game, he's not doing that against New Orleans. He's certainly not going to put up enough points. So yeah, let's get that out the way. I'm taking the Saints, and I'm taking the points and saying, give them all the points you want. Give them a few more. Saints are blowing them out next week. So get your money down, I guess, for the Eagle upset. Or maybe I just jinxed the Saints. So yeah, your thoughts?
Well, you know what, Randy? I think at this point, what you need is a tall glass of whiskey.
That better be a very tall glass.
It's a big glass. It might be the whole bottle.
Is that
So you
Wildcard
enjoy that?
101? Yes.
No, it's not. But I don't think you'll with that much. I don't think it matters what it is. Actually, after that, I don't think you want to drink anything good. I think that's like bottom shelf swill that you're drinking there. But
Are you giving me the Animal House advice? Are you telling me your advice to me is to start drinking heavily?
If the shoe fits. So yeah, that's it's Saint Nick. Saint Nick strikes again. Now the funniest thing, I'm watching the game and I watch the whole game and I watch the kick. The funniest moment in that kick, however, is the Bears mascot is underneath the goalposts and the kick is missed and he just literally falls over sideways. He's like on his knees and then, like praying and then just falls over on his side. I sent you I think I sent you the video of that on your, your phone.
Well, thanks.
So yeah, I was dying and bringing, giving new meaning to their phrase, which is, isn't their whole thing bear down? Well, the bear actually was down.
You know what? I'm just watching it. Yep. Bear down.
Bear down. Yeah. Yeah.
I knew he missed it too, by the way. The minute it left his foot.
Yeah.
I'm watching the game. I looked at my dad. I'm like, he missed that. I already knew. The fact it hit the crossbar, I was like, is that going to bank in? And it's like, no, it's not. It's going to bounce and hit the crossbar and bounce out. Bounce the wrong way.
Yeah, he had 7 goalposts that he hit this year, which is pretty impressive in a bad way. You want to talk about gimmies. I don't know that Vegas will take this bet because it's pretty much a lock. There is no way that Cody Parkey is the Bears kicker next year.
Next year, is it possible they could release him tomorrow? I mean, I guess you don't do these things in the off season this quickly, maybe, but
honestly, shouldn't they have cut him like the minute the whistle blew?
If you could do it, if I could do it, if I had that power. It goes back to that app I said we wanted to invent, right? Where I said that I wish there was an app that we could use in fantasy, because you and I both play in fantasy sports leagues. We play fantasy baseball. We play fantasy football. In the past, we even had played fantasy basketball. And I'd said an app that would be awesome would be somehow or another, because the leagues we play in, when a player gets cut, everyone in the league gets notified via email. So-and-so, this roster move was made. So-and-so was released. And I told you before, it'd be awesome if there was some sort of app where you could actually have it somehow or another forward these emails to the players involved, so that when a player stinks or does something absolutely terrible or horrible or costs his team a game, and millions of people out there cut him, his inbox would be flooded with literally the roster moves of teams all across America cutting bait with said player. I thought that would sell very well in the fantasy sports community. On a night like tonight, it would sell well just to the general NFL community of fans, at least the ones that are in Chicago. Philly fans probably were big Cody Parkey fans, but yeah, I could take some action on that. I pretty sure the Bears will have a new kicker, considering how many kicks he missed this year. It's a little surprising that never came up in season for a team that sometimes struggled to score points, sometimes was in close games or thought they would be in close games due to their team makeup and their defense, that they didn't have a more reliable kicker for a moment like this. I mean, he did make 3 field goals in the game, but we're not going to remember those, are we?
No. And by the way, he is trending on Twitter, as if you didn't know that. There have been 80,200 tweets on Cody Parkey.
I'm shocked, I tell you. Shocked.
Twice as many tweets on Cody Parkey as there have been on Nick Foles.
Well, like I said, Cody Parkey will be the story from this game. It's going to be the kick that he missed.
It's wide right all over again. As a Bills fan, I can appreciate that.
Well, we said right before we went on, I said, I can feel your pain. As you pointed out, it's not exactly the same pain. It wasn't a Super Bowl, so I can't say I feel your pain, but I do have more empathy.
And it wasn't 4 years in a row.
That is true. So any other thoughts on this game other than I, at this point, hate Cody Parkey and pray for Nick Foles' salvation beyond what he's done to himself?
No, it just it made for some interesting lines for next week. So the Rams are favored by 7 over Dallas, and New Orleans is favored by 8.5 over Philly. Those are the opening lines. The two on the AFC side, Kansas City is favored by 5.5 over Indy, and New England is favored by 4.5 over San Diego.
Again, we'll talk about this more at length. And
absolutely.
We don't want to really get into spoilers, but my feeling is that, if I had to pick, I feel like you're going to see upsets in the AFC before you see them in the NFC. Everybody had been pointing towards a Rams Saints, rematch. And of course he'll be in the dome if they do have it. Ironically enough, thanks to Kansas City and to the now knocked out Bears, I'm pretty sure that's what's going to happen. But the AFC may be a different story. That's going to be an interesting. I'm more interested in what's going to happen in the AFC than the NFC, because I really feel the NFC games will be more of a foregone conclusion than the AFC will. But then again, I was wrong on every single prediction I had this week. So what do I know? Apparently, I have a mouth and a microphone in front of me, and that qualifies me to make a prediction about as well as any of my dogs.
Well, maybe what I should do is stick with the just picking the games, because my over-unders were really bad. I was 1-3 on my over-unders.
Shootout. You called this one a shootout, or you thought it would be potentially?
I thought that there would be a little bit of that. There was just both teams looked inept on offense. I mean, they had moments, but not any kind of lengthy, stretches where it was like, wow, these teams are just moving the ball here. But I was 3-1 on the on my picks, so I got that going for me,
which is nice. I was going to say Chicago is kind of a violent city. Maybe when you were saying shootout, you were anticipating Cody Parkey having to get back to his car safely after the game, with fans hanging outside of Soldier Field. Maybe that's where you were envisioning when you were thinking of shootout, or maybe not.
I was not thinking anything of violence. Let's make that clear. I thought it would be a shootout in the football sense, not in the violence sense. It may be a shootout in the violence sense later tonight, but not right now.
Yeah, there was no rhythm on offense for either team. There really wasn't. There were occasional good plays by either offense that seemed to be aberrations in the greater scheme of things, almost like, wow, that actually worked. Wow, he actually made that pass. Crazily enough, Trubisky ended up over 300 passing yards. I'm not really sure where those came or how he got to those. And I watched the game, and every single play, I didn't step out for any length of time. I didn't lapse into a coma for a quarter and a half. I just don't know how he piled up 303 yards passing. And I mentioned Foles was at 266, and like I said, I saw a lot of just, I saw a couple good passes by Foles. I saw some terrible passes. I saw a couple terrible ones from Trubisky, who did not get picked off, didn't turn it over, but tried a couple times, had a couple near misses. And both running games were pretty much non-existent. Eagles ran for 42 yards on 23 carries. That includes the kneel down by Foles to end the game. That's a 1.8 yard per average, or average per carry. The Bears ran for 65 yards of rushing, 3.6 yard per carry. Trubisky was not really effective running the ball or scrambling, and he had that moment early in the game where it looked like he might have pulled something on that one scramble where he went to the blue tent, and all Bear fans everywhere were shuddering in fear at the prospect of Chase Daniel entering the game. And when that happened, I looked at my dad and said, if Daniel comes in, this game's over. It's over at this point. But, maybe that affected Trubisky and his mobility, and that was a big part of his game this year. But yeah, today was just ugly football. It's just the first game was really ugly, and the Chargers almost found a way to lose that game. Lamar Jackson did lead a comeback, obviously, but fumbled. What was that? His third fumble of the game, I think it was, to end it. When they had a chance to somehow or another were within a touchdown and had the ball. But yeah, just ugly football. Ugly, ugly, ugly. Unless you're, like I said, a Charger fan or an Eagle fan, and you think today is the greatest day that you could possibly have had. Until next week.
Well, let's be honest. The Eagle fans are shocked that their team is even in the playoffs. Most of the ones I know, they're still on the high of last year, right? After never having
house money.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
And we've talked about that before because you're, for people obviously who don't know your rooting affiliations, from a baseball standpoint, you grew up a Boston Red Sox fan, and you suffered many, many years of Red Sox ineptitude or heartbreak or soul crushing defeats, and we won't even go through some of those because even years and years later, those are still scarring events for you. Not going to mention any names, Bill Buckner.
You know what? Honestly, at this point, I'm kind of over it. Yeah, it's that 86 is kind of like an asterisk. It's like a blip on the everything I've known in the last 12 years has been success. I mean, we have 4 World Series titles in the last 12 years. 13 years. We
talked about it. You as a Red Sox fan, you grew up, and again, to tie it in with my father, a Bears fan, but grew up in Springfield, Massachusetts. So he grew up a Red Sox fan. And, you, much like him, had lived in a world where the Red Sox never won anything. There are now people who are teenagers, right? Late teens, who have grown up in a world where all they know is Red Sox dominance. And how crazy is that for anyone who never grew up in that world to realize do you want to tell those people it wasn't always this way? But when your team wins, like you said, you've had so much success as a Red Sox fan, rooting them on and seeing them succeed. Once you won that first World Series, there was that honeymoon period, as you said, like the Eagle fans have, where nothing really is going to trouble you because it's like we're still the defending champs. It's okay. You win that much, yeah, it's a different story than if you're a long suffering franchise. Talk to an Eagles fan before last year, and it was heartbreak and disappointment and missed opportunities. And you said Eagle fans who are still living that dream from last year, who are just happy, as they would say, just happy to be here, right, in the playoffs.
Yes,
maybe some more magic on their way. We'll see. We shall see. So, yeah, that's about all I have to say about today's football games. This is, I had a few more choice words that thankfully, we had a little bit of a delay before we got going here because I was probably a little bit more animated. Where would you put that on the Randy animated scale of 1 to 10? Because you've heard me on all levels before. That
was like a 4. That was a 4.
That's actually a mild one. I can do more. Yes, I can get more animated than that. I can get more angry than that. I'm trying to stay reserved. We are getting older, and you got to watch out for your health and your heart and things like that. So
I can remember some fantasy baseball rants that were epic.
Oh God. Well,
once we get into baseball season, listeners, we will for sure hear some choice words for players. You've also had some choice words for owners in certain leagues. We will not name names or name leagues, but
are we talking about real leagues? Or are we talking about fantasy leagues or
fantasy leagues? Fantasy leagues.
Oh yes,
fantasy leagues and fantasy owners.
Absolutely.
Breaking news.
Right. Well, it's heading on ESPN right now. Apparently, Tom Thibodeau, a Chicago link there, has been fired by the Minnesota Timberwolves. That's official. He is no longer the president or head coach. Team announced that tonight.
I got 2 words for that. Who cares? This is the NBA. The NBA is almost irrelevant until playoff time. So
it is true. I just saw that at the top of the ESPN feed there really quickly.
I'd much rather see at the top of the ESPN feed Bears cut Cody Parkey.
Wait for tomorrow. They won't do it tonight. Wait a few days. They got to let the.
They honestly. Wouldn't that send a message to the fans? But just doing it tonight, just say, yeah, we're tired of this crap too.
It would send some message. Oh God! If it had cost me a game, I absolutely would have rage cut him because I guess we can talk about like a favorite story of rage cut since we're talking about rage cutting and you talk about that of the Blake Snell rage cut from last season that I did. So to set this up for anyone listening, I was in a tight race. Steven and I have been in the same fantasy baseball league for upcoming season will be 27 years. And Steven and I haven't known each other that long. He joined the league after its inception. I started the league and the only original owner left. It's a very competitive 16-team mixed league, very cutthroat, friendly. I mean, we're all friends now. We're all friends. We've had some intense rivalries and the like, and such an intense rivalry played out with a owner who is no longer in the league and myself last year. And that rivalry led to basically the two of us being the only 2 teams left in contention to win going down to the last week. And we were battling in pitching categories. And I do believe the 2 pitchers, because you forget there were 2 rage cuts that week. There was Drew Pomeranz, who was with the Red Sox, who was on my pitching staff, and Blake Snell from Tampa, who won the Cy Young Award this year. But last year was not quite that good. He was still finding himself. And at multiple points during that last week, since there are no pickups after, once the off season hits, there's no movement and you can't pick anyone up because it's a keeper league and you got to be careful about things like that. I actually did rage cut Pomeranz after a start and then rage cut Snell in the middle of the week when he still had a start left, which was going to show up on my team. And Blake Snell then went out and pitched literally what may have been the best game of his entire career. And just to clarify, we're in a weekly move league. So yes.
if it was a daily move, you would not have gotten his second start.
If it had been a daily move, I never would have heard the end of it. That would have been tragic if that had been a daily league and I had done that. But Pomeranz, because I'm looking back at his season last year, the outing that I cut Pomeranz on looks like it was, is this correct? Yeah. A 2-inning 5 earned run job on September 25th against Toronto, where he got hammered, and that was it. He wasn't in my starting lineup the last week of the season. And pitching categories, like I said, were very tight, and Snell was in my rotation because I really didn't have any other options that were better. And he had a 2-start week that week. And it was against the Yankees for both of those starts, if you remember correctly. And I'm sorry, the Yankees for the first start, Baltimore for the second. And the Yankee start, he managed to make all of 1 inning, giving up 4 hits and 4 walks and 4 earned runs. And that's when I dropped the cut hammer on him and jettisoned him from my team. At the end of the week, the move showed up in everyone's feed immediately. that I had cut him. But I did get his last start, the 7-inning, no earned run, 2-hit, no walk, 13 strikeout win that actually won me the league. So there was a light at the end of that tunnel, correct? There was. So yeah, rage cuts. The Bears won't do that. They could. It'd be funny if they did, but they won't.
They should. They should. All right. Well, this will allow us to transition into real baseball. We are in what should be the height of the hot stove league, with training camps opening up about 6 weeks from now at this point, and still we've had this, as we mentioned earlier. This has not been much of a hot stove. It's been, I wouldn't call it a cold stove. It's more or less been a lukewarm stove. We've seen a couple of signings, but not the big boys. Two big pieces are Bryce Harper and Manny Machado. They have not signed. On the pitching side, Craig Kimbrell, Dallas Keuchel have not signed. Most of the other, there's not really a lot of depth in pitching. Not in free agency. No. We have had a few of pitchers sign. Patrick Corbin signed, Eovaldi signed, Charlie Morton, J.A. Happ, and I just saw this. I guess I had missed this. Lance Lynn signed with the Rangers.
Oh, that's going to help the Rangers staff.
3 years, $30 million. Which sounds like a lot, except that's probably $10 million for a pitcher probably isn't that much these days. The other pitchers that are still available on free agency, Gio Gonzalez, Wade Miley, Drew Pomerantz, as you previously mentioned, Mike Fears, Derek Holland, Clay Buchholz, Matt Harvey. I mean, those are some pretty bad pitchers.
That is an uninspiring group. That reminds, you might as well be naming off the guys, again, using an Animal House reference, the guys that get shuffled off to the side in the beginning of the movie to the non-pledge section. I mean, you know what those guys are?
Those are guys, all those guys, those are all guys that will not be on my fantasy team this coming year.
Make that prediction.
That's what those guys are.
It's a weak pitching crop. You're absolutely correct on that.
If any of those guys are on my fantasy team as in a starting role, in a starting position, something has gone horribly wrong.
horribly wrong.
But there are pitchers that are rumored to be traded. We have heard rumors of either Corey Kluber or Trevor Bauer. We've heard rumors about Noah Syndergaard, although I cannot imagine that the Mets will trade him. The Yankees will probably are looking to trade Sonny Gray, but I'm not sure who actually might be interested in giving them anything for him. Couple of others, Marcus Stroman was mentioned because they're in a rebuilding mode, and I believe he's a free agent, if not this year, the following year. And Madison Bumgarner is another one. Wasn't Alex Wood just traded? Wasn't he part of that?
He was part of that salary dump by the Dodgers, where the Dodgers told the Reds, take all of this and just give us anything back, because we have to take a player back by some major league bylaw. We can't just give you all of this. You have to give us something. And then that something turned out to be Homer Bailey, which is equivalent to trading for a bag of balls at this point. So,
but what did they trade away? They traded away Yasiel Puig
and Kemp, wasn't it?
Wood and Kemp for Homer Bailey and the Rose Bushes.
Pretty much. And that was now, which leads us into our free agent predictions and one of our bets. Yes. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of the other free agents that are available. And looking at the batters that are available. If you keep hearing dinging in the background, that's basically notifications reminding me the Bears have lost from various sources. That's a little ringing noise that says, by the way, still losers. Thanks a lot, Dell or HP or whatever crappy computer I have that's giving me these notifications. Yes, on the market, we mentioned Harper was kind of our bet, and we have a big bet. Would you like to tell our listeners the huge amount of money we have riding on where Harper is going to sign? I have kind of the field, and you kind of have one team. Would you like to announce to them the huge wager, the monstrous wager we put on this bet?
Well, it's to borrow a term from from Trading Places, the standard bet of $1.
American.
I believe he's going to $1 American. Yes. I believe that he's going to stay with Washington. I've said that from the very beginning. I just don't see him going elsewhere. And you thought I was wrong, so we made the bet $1. And for a while there, it looked like you might be right. It looked like LA was freeing up salary to possibly go out and get him. But now word came out this week that he met with Washington ownership right around Christmas time, and that 10-year, $300 million contract that they offered him earlier apparently was a starting point. So it has been reported that they have offered him significantly more than that. I don't know if it means that they shortened the years and added money, or if they just kept it at the 10 years or whatever. And I sort of get the sense that the Dodgers did their move because they're trying to get under the salary cap, that they can't really justify, paying the luxury tax year after year and failing to win anything. So,
well, my take on this has been that Washington should sign Harper. So it's never been a case of me thinking that that Washington couldn't afford him or that they shouldn't sign him. Harper is a transcendent talent. Obviously, he is. He has not necessarily produced like to the level of, let's say, Mike Trout has, but he's been really good. Even this last season, where you would say, your first instinct was, well, Bryce Harper had a terrible season. He ended up, once he came on in the second half of the year, he still had he still led the majors, or at least the league, the National League in walks with 130. He had an OPS of 889. He had 34 homers and 100 RBIs. The only thing that wasn't really there was the batting average. But he still is, and he's young. He's 20. He's going to be 26, or he is 26. But he's in an age 26 season. He's in the middle of his prime. Guys like Bryce Harper don't grow on trees. And if you are Washington, there's absolutely no reason to let a guy like that go if you have the ability to pay him. And the thing with Washington we were talking about was that they do have the money, because if you check their payroll, they had a lot of salary that came off of the books from 2018 to now. I believe Jason Worth's salary came off the books. Gio Gonzalez had been on their roster last year, and he's a free agent. Speaking of pitching free agents that don't inspire a lot of confidence, he is no longer on the books. Just between that, Ryan Zimmerman is gone too, is he not?
Ryan Zimmerman was another one. Yeah.
So Zimmerman was $14 million last year. Gio was making $12 million last year. That's $26 million. And what else did we say? Jason Worth was still being paid. I believe, he was $10.5 million. So that's $36.5 million in just in those three players.
And didn't they get rid of Daniel Murphy as well at some point during the season? Didn't his salary come off?
I believe Murphy was traded. So that would have been money gone. But I guess a misconception maybe about Harper is that, well, he wasn't making any money and now he's going to make this huge amount of money. He made last year almost $22 million. He was the second highest paid player on the Nationals. I just cut 30 some million by getting rid of Zimmerman, Gonzalez, and Worth. Even if you just factored in what they were paying Worth, then that gets you to 31, 32 million a year. So what do you care at that point, right? If that's what he's looking for, if you're Washington, you certainly should be able to pay that. You have the funds. It's not, and they're a big market team. Now, I said that I couldn't believe that it got this far, because if you're Washington, you could have just thrown, and I know Boris wanted to test free agency, but if you come out and you say, this is what we're looking for, and you're Washington and you're like, okay, here it is, then I don't understand why he wouldn't have signed by now, because it doesn't look necessarily, like you said, you need two to tango in order to get a really big contract. And I don't know where that other team is coming from. My thought was the salary dump by the Dodgers wasn't an attempt to get under the any sort of luxury tax, that it was more about trying to free up money themselves to pay Harper. And the fact that they got rid of two outfielders as part of that move, to me, said, well, that is this is the money that we're going to give Bryce Harper. But apparently I'm not hearing that there's any sort of big offer out there for him. And you think they're trying to get under the luxury tax, but I asked the question, why? You're the Dodgers. That TV contract they have for their local, right? The local TV contract, they make a ridiculous amount of money. The Dodgers literally are printing money. They're a market team, like the Yankees, like the Red Sox, like the Cubs, where honestly, payroll and the luxury tax should never have any implication. Who cares? You're still making money with the franchise. Pay what you need to. If you can pay it, and you know me, I've always hated the payroll disparities in baseball, and the ability of a team like the Yankees in the past to throw money at anything and fix problems, and not do it where you have a team like Oakland with a small market where Billy Beane literally has to jump through all kinds of hoops and pull off all these amazing trades and acquisitions and draft picks to put a competitive team on the field, because he doesn't have that type of payroll. He doesn't get the luxury of making some catastrophically bad decision in free agency and getting away with it, right? But you're the Dodgers. You don't care. You're not constrained by that. So why not just say, what do you want? Here's a check. Sign it. Come to LA. Be a star. Hang out with the big stars and make your brand and become a celebrity and get your endorsements and everything else. Why don't you do that? Why doesn't Washington do that, though? I mean, are they hardballing Harper?
I don't think that they are. I think it's, honestly, this is just Boris. This is, you're dealing with Scott Boris, who is, even if you made a legitimate offer, he's just going to let it sit there. He's going to say, no, I'm going to see what else is out there. And he's just going to play this out. And, I could definitely see this not actually happening until sometime in February.
So we could be looking at the long winter of Bryce Harper. But the problem is if you're not Bryce Harper, because he's the big piece, right? If you're not Harper, well, you're kind of hanging out and you're waiting, because the other pieces aren't going to start falling until Harper signs, in theory. Now, if you're Manny Machado, that's not entirely true. Maybe.
That's not entirely true, because I just see that who did Milwaukee just sign? Oh, they just signed Nelson Cruz. So Nelson Cruz saw the market and it's like, yeah, I'll take a 1 year. 13
okay,
or 14.
I actually missed that.
You didn't see that?
Milwaukee signed Nelson Cruz? Where are they going to play him? Isn't it?
DH.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. National League team signing a DH. That's a great move. You're serious? So that actually happened.
I'm 99% sure. I'm just looking.
Are you checking your source? Are you checking your sources?
My source was ESPN. ESPN's never wrong.
ESPN is right on all accounts. The bastion, the bastion of journalistic integrity and accuracy that is ESPN, No. You know what? You confuse you. No,
Yeah,
Minnesota.
I'm sorry. Oh, I take that back. Minnesota. Got it. Got my bad.
Minnesota, Milwaukee, tomato.
Somewhere in the upper
Is what you-
northwest, starts with an M. I don't know.
So that tall glass of whiskey, were you drinking it, or was that reserved just for me, or were you having some of that whiskey?
I don't know. I think it's just water with lemon I'm drinking,
Confusing.
but maybe it's I don't know.
Confusing Minnesota and Milwaukee. Yes.
Yeah, well, at least my point was, no matter where he ended up signing, was that he basically saw he didn't want to wait around, right? He just was like, nope, I'm 38 years old. I'll take that 1-year deal. They need some power hitters. They had a DH spot available for him. What was it, $13 million they gave him?
I'm looking at I'm trying to pull him up now in the actual signings. Nelson Cruz did sign with Minnesota, and that will be a deal of, couldn't have been for two, at his age, he's not getting a lengthy deal. That was a 1 year, it was a 2-year deal, but the second year is a $12 million team option with a $300,000 buyout.
It's a $14.3 million contract. So that's all it's guaranteed.
And if he plays really well, then the Twins would get him for $12 million in 2020, so at a reduced salary. So if he's as effective as he was last season and stays healthy, my guess is Minnesota would probably renew him back at that. So he took a contract that was actually comparable because
he had 37 home runs last year.
He's still Nelson Cruz. He drives the ball a long way, hits for good power. When he makes contact, it goes far. His contract with Seattle had actually been for 4 years at $14.25 million. So he really didn't take a pay cut. This is pretty close to, at least for one season, pretty much what he made. And if you're right, if you're him and you're looking at the market and you're his age, you don't want to end up being one of these free agents who's standing out there in the end of March going, I don't have a team and everything's kind of solidifying around me and I don't know where I'm going to play. So he saw an opening, he saw a good contract offer and he took it, and that's probably was the right move for him. We're talking, other big guys. We have Machado, who's hanging out there, also young, 26. I feel like Machado's older than that. Feels for some reason he feels older than Harper, except he's not. Officially he's not.
Yeah, he came up. He was young. He was young when he came up.
The question with Machado, because my favorite baseball team is the White Sox, and I've heard they were linked to both Harper and Machado, and I didn't buy into it because they're not the team to spend that type of money on. That's going to take to land either one of those guys. But I've heard that they are supposedly one of the leaders for Machado. And as a White Sox fan, I'm not really sure I want him there because I'm not really sure after watching some of what I saw from him after he went to the Dodgers and some of the questions about his clubhouse character and the way he plays. And I don't know. I have a bad feeling that he'll sign that contract and it's going to be big money and maybe it's not going to be a good contract because he might be one of those who pockets the money and says, "Yep, okay, I'm getting paid. I'm good now." I don't know.
To get back to some of the free agents, I mentioned some guys who actually aren't free agents that have signed. The list I was looking at must have been old. I'm looking at a more accurate one now. Anibal Sanchez actually signed with the Nationals for 2 years, $19 million.
He had a good season with Atlanta. It was last year, I believe. That was kind of their Tanner Roark replacement because I believe they had let Tanner Roark go. So whether that's an upgrade or not, that remains to be seen. We'll see.
Yeah, actually a lot. Yes, I'm looking at this. A lot more of the free agents have signed than I thought. We mentioned Nelson Cruz. Matt Harvey actually signed for a year with the Angels for $11 million. It's not bad money for a guy who's pretty terrible.
For a guy who just is just not what he was. And this is gonna shock you. We talk about Matt Harvey. How old is Matt Harvey. Because you think of Matt Harvey as this young Mets pitcher who had the arm injuries and the like. How old would you say Matt Harvey is?
I believe he will be turning 30 before opening day.
He will be 30. So he is no longer a youngster. So he's a 30-year-old coming off a season that he posted a pretty mediocre at best 4.94 ERA, and his 155 innings he split with the Mets in Cincinnati, and he doesn't really strike people out anymore, and he gives up too many home runs, and he just isn't very good. And he hasn't been since the Mets ruined him in 2015, as they have so many. Or actually, in 2013, he had that great year. He was injured. He actually had a very good 2015 coming off of that, and then he got hurt again in 2016, and ever since then the wheels are off on Matt Harvey. He once finished fourth in the Cy Young voting. But he's going to be a case like so many that's one thing about baseball. So many players that you can look back and say, what if, right? He's a good what if story.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm looking at other guys that are still available. We mentioned Machado, Bryce Harper, Dallas Keuchel, others that are available. AJ Pollock is still available.
He's a good name. He's a guy, if he can stay healthy, can make a major addition to anybody's outfield. Question with him is whether he can stay healthy. He seems to have an issue with injuries. Brian Dozier, who is on the market, and he's another guy. He's only 32, but he feels older than that. DJ LeMahieu, who is a guy who I would expect people look at that and see that's a Colorado product, and that probably maybe hurts his market. The irony is, I think Colorado is looking at bringing Dozier possibly. That's a rumor in on a very short deal, whereas LeMahieu they let go, and I'm not really sure LeMahieu won't come cheaper than Dozier. But what would the upgrade there be? I don't know if there would be one, a significant one, and maybe not to the amount of money it's going to cost to bring Dozier in versus him. I guess we'll have to wait and see when the contracts are actually signed. And then there's a lot of guys that are just guys out there that are available. Adam Jones. Remember when he was really good? That's been a while, huh?
I owned him. I owned him last year, did I believe. He was not very good.
Making you feel old talking about guys. Adam Jones now 33. And he formerly with Baltimore, and he's not going back because they're completely tearing that down. Carlos Gonzalez is a free agent again, and he had returned to Colorado on that 1-year deal. And I guess the question is, are they going to do this? Is it going to be the same thing? Is he going to try to wait out a contract, not get one, and go back to Colorado? His numbers for them were not terrible. They weren't appreciably different than they were the year before, and Colorado brought him back. So I guess, that'll be a question to see about him. But yet another guy that was really good for a period of time and is kind of in that stage of his career where he's kind of on the decline, but he's only 33. And he feels like he's been around a lot longer than that, because he came up when he was 22. But boy, it just feels like we've been talking about him a long time.
Yeah. A couple of the other guys that are still available. Jed Lowry.
A favorite of yours.
Yeah, he had a very nice first half of the season, kind of faded off. He battled a few injuries in the second half of the season, but he's 34, so he's no spring chicken. Yasmani Grandal is still a free agent. Of course, question is whether he can catch or not. No one doubts that he can hit, but
he's a DH masquerading as a catcher, is what you're saying.
Currently, yeah. I mean, so maybe there's an AL team that might be interested in him. Nick Markakis is available. He's a free agent, 35 years old.
Markakis, a man
who had a very, very nice season.
Kind of out of nowhere, because we had, in our circles, we refer to Markakis as the king of meh, because he really just didn't do anything. He just kind of showed up and he played games and he tallied at bats and stayed healthy, and He didn't hit for power. He didn't hit for average anymore. He didn't drive anyone in. He didn't score any runs. He just he was there, and then he put up a pretty solid season. Though his power, I want to say, kind of slumped in the second half last year. He feels like he hit more power for more power in the first half, and then that just kind of vanished in the second half. I may be mistaken on that.
No, you're not. You're not mistaken, because he finished with 14.
10 homers in the first 94 games and 4 in the last 68. 61 ribbies in those first 94 games, 32 in the last. He hit 323 in the first 94 games, 258 afterwards. Which one of those is the real Marquez? Which is the Marquez that we know and love, Steven? I believe it's that second one, isn't it?
It is the second one, but he does have a good glove. He was a Gold Glove, Silver Slugger.
He's got a good beard. If you check his Baseball Reference picture, he's got that's a competitive beard he's got going on there.
He's got that that thick, lustrous beard. No doubt about that. Yeah, so you have him. Let me see. Jose Iglesias, Gio Gonzalez, Wade Miley, Mike Moustakas is still available. Power at third base. Asdrubal Cabrera is still available. Adam Ottavino, there's a guy who probably is going to get a nice chunk of money as a really, really one of those top level middle reliever guys.
Well, it seems like there are certainly more potential guys you could build if you wanted to work out of a pen than you would if you're looking for starting pitching. Because as you said, the starting pitching is kind of weak as far as what's out there. Keuchel is probably the best, I think, of the bunch. Like I said, Gio Gonzalez is but yeah, there's some good relievers, and Ottavino seems to be the, other than Kimbrel, who's going to fetch a good chunk of money. Ottavino is probably your best opportunity to get a dominant reliever without having to pay closer dominant prices for. Which, you're a Red Sox fan. Any chance the Red Sox, you think, bring Kimbrel back? Or is that a ship that's sailed at this point?
I just don't know who their closer is going to be if they don't bring him back. I don't know that they have someone on the I think by putting one of their other guys from their roster in that closer's role, it makes the rest of their bullpen a lot weaker. Maybe they go and get, an Ottavino and then say, all right, we'll just figure out who our closer is going to be. Kimbrel was just very sketchy towards the end of last year. Even though they won the World Series, never felt confident when he was in the game.
Yeah, it was dicey in the playoffs on numerous occasions. So here's a curveball. They did re-sign Eovaldi. Could they not make Eovaldi the closer?
They could. They absolutely could. He was really, really good, and maybe in a short in short spurts, it keeps him healthier. That's possible. They didn't give him a ton of money. I mean, it was a ton of money for you or I, but in baseball numbers, it was, I think they gave him like $16 million a year, somewhere in that range. Not particularly that much. I just saw earlier today the Yankees officially signed Zach Britton, 3-year, $39 million,
bringing him back. So, my feeling is, and I think Eovaldi as the closer is the sleeper move to do. I think it's one where, like you said, he's had issues with health before, and maybe pitching out of the pen will keep him healthier. He last year he threw 22 1/3 innings in the playoffs. He did have 2 starts as part of that, and both of those starts were actually really good. But 8 of those were bullpen innings that he threw in the World Series.
One of those was a 6 or 7 inning outing in that long extra inning game, game 2. So remember, he did give up the home run, but pitched incredibly well and they had no other pitcher. I mean, there was no one else they could actually use at that moment.
He was really good in the playoffs last year. He had a 1.61 ERA. He gave up the 1 home run, 4 earned in 22 1/3, 3 walks, 16 Ks. I mean, he's got great stuff. He always did, even when he was with the Marlins and then with the Yankees. he had tremendous stuff. But the question will be, I guess, whether or not the Red Sox do bring in somebody else, because I despite what the Tampa Bay Rays would tell you, a very good starting pitcher is worth more than a really good reliever. And that's a subject for another time we'll discuss. Speaking of rants and baseball discussions, are relievers as starters or not starters, or whatever Tampa was doing last year when Blake Snell was not taking the mound. That's essentially what it boiled down to.
Here's another option that they could go with. I just noticed that Cody Allen is a free agent at the present time.
Allen is, and he's had experience in the closer's role. I don't know. He always seemed to be just one step away from losing that closer's job in Cleveland. He was always, it wasn't, maybe it was because Miller was behind him. He had a rough year last year, almost a 5 ERA, 4.70 ERA. Gave up 11 homers. That's a lot of home runs pitching out of the pen in what he threw 67 innings. That's not really what you want to see out of your closer. But, prior to that, his numbers had been really, pretty solid, and he had been more than serviceable for Cleveland. It's funny you mentioned trading. You've actually seen trade rumors on Kluber and Bauer. You said, correct? Because you were talking about those as being,
yes, more so on Kluber, but the thought was that they would trade either Kluber or Bauer to free up some salary and also to restock their minor leagues.
Well, Bauer's arbitration eligible this year. Kluber signed for only one more season officially. So the Cleveland only has him for $17 million this year. They do have 2 team options for $17.5 million in 2020 and $18 million in 2021, with $1 million buyouts for either one of those years. I just, again, isn't Cleveland expecting to win that division or contend for a World Series again? Are they rebuilding? I don't know why you trade one of those guys if you are planning on competing, unless I'm missing something. I mean, they have Carrasco and they have Clevenger. They have a deep rotation.
Yeah, I think they do have a deep rotation. And Kluber is 33. Hasn't definitely, we've seen a regression, unless 2018 is an outlier. He's struggled with some injuries.
It's crazy. You'd think he struggled with injuries. He really didn't. He actually led the league in innings pitched last year.
Last year he was. I meant the prior years. The year before that, I feel like he missed a good chunk of time.
He missed a couple starts. Not many though. So he's been, he won 20 last year. The year before he was 18-4 with a 2.25 ERA. So his ERA bumped back up a bit, but only to 2.89. And that may have been, his strikeout rate dropped a little bit from what it had been, or but again, his Cy Young winning season of 2017 was so good. If you look at his numbers, they kind of just regress back to what he was in 2016 and 2015, 2014, which was still like one of the best pitchers in the American League. So he did regress, but from his 2017 campaign, only because that was such a good campaign. But he was really good. He is getting up there, and sometimes with pitchers, when that wall hits, then it can go down in a hurry, I guess. Bauer kind of broke out last year, but with Carrasco was hurt for at least a decent bit of the season last year. Maybe with Bauer, they're looking at last year as the outlier, and they're saying, he really made steps up in so many ways, cut his strike or his home run rate more than in half, kept his strikeout per 9, actually went up to 11.3 per 9, lowered his walk rate. He just put up a very good season that didn't fall in line with what you would have expected looking at his previous seasons, maybe they're looking at that as he's good, but he's not as good as he looked. And if we can get something for him, we still have Clevenger, we still have Carrasco, we keep Kluber, and we don't pay the huge raise this season's going to bring when he goes to arbitration. Correct? Maybe that's the thought process in line with Bauer, is that maybe they think that was a little bit more of a fluky performance. But always strange to see a team that won the division talking about trading one of their best pitchers from that team, except maybe that's an indication how weak Cleveland thinks the rest of the division is, that they can do that. And
the Twins have gotten better. In addition to Nelson Cruz, they added Jonathan Scope and CJ Cron this offseason. So that definitely increases their offensive abilities. One of the other things that we don't pay enough attention to is the way that the Major League Baseball teams now really value their draft picks and don't like to give them up. And a lot of these, kind of questionable free agents that are, do I want them? Do I not want them? They don't want to have to give up that compensation pick. And that could be hurting somebody like Grandal and somebody like LeMahieu, guys that are, they'd be nice fit, but they're not really that much better than other players that are out there, and we wouldn't have to give up a draft pick to do it. That is one of the things that might be driving some of these players not yet signing. But I have a feeling more than anything that there's a lot of pieces will start to fall into a place once Bryce Harper and or Manny Machado sign. Teams don't want to, if they think they have a chance at Machado or Harper, they're not going to saddle themselves with a another contract that that might make things a little bit more difficult to negotiate the deal. So that's very much a possibility that will and the problem, of course, is when is that going to happen? Last I heard, Machado has only received one offer. Harper has only received one official offer. I'm not sure what's going on. And let's be honest, this is the second year in a row we've seen this, where we've seen, some of these veteran players kind of fall out of favor. It used to be that teams would really, they look for these guys that they could sign for 2 years on a discounted deal, and nowadays they just don't. I mean, look at what Moustakas went through last year, right? I mean, he should have gotten a pretty decent deal, and no one was willing to part with signing him for more than 1 year.
ESPN did have an article that I didn't read, because it's part of their
no.
I know it's shocking. I'm not reading stuff on ESPN anymore, but going through it, it's one of their, what used to be their insider, I guess, is now E+ or whatever it's called for when you have to pay for the content. And Buster Olney has an article, and it's about, can Union Chief, meaning Tony Clark, find a way to fire up the hot stove? Because it's talking about like what we've been discussing, which is there's just things not going on and players not being signed. But I think it's more of a change. I don't know if there's really a way to force teams to pay guys. Like you said, I can pay a guy this amount of money to put up this larger amount of money to put up a performance and give up a draft pick, when I could just call up somebody from our farm system who will be almost as good or relatively good at a fraction of the cost and won't cost me a draft pick. And I think that's the model teams have moved towards in baseball. More teams building through their farm systems, and as you said, valuing those draft picks to where that you can't make a team. What's the old saying? You can bring the horse to water, but you can't make them drink. You can't make teams sign mediocre players to contracts when there's options that are cheaper. I don't know what Tony Clark or the Players Union can do about that, but this is now multiple years we've seen that. And you mentioned Moustakas. You would think he would have gotten more money, but there were guys like that out there, weren't there? I mean, like a player, and he's not a guy I would have given a lot of money to, but Logan Morrison, we had talked about last year, who I believe coincidentally is a free agent again this year. had a pretty good season with Tampa. He had a lot of home runs, but he's one of those guys. All he did was really hit for power, and that's kind of prevalent in baseball these days. It's easier to find those guys, and because of that, didn't matter how many home runs he hit, how many guys he drove in. There just wasn't a market for him, and the Twins got him on a huge discount from what you might have thought he would have gone for, except that was his market. And then he went out and stunk up the joint, and that's why Nelson Cruz is wearing a Twins uniform this year, right?
Right, they completely overpaid for him.
Yeah, and there's the irony. As much of a bargain as it might have looked like. Well, I can't believe that a guy who put up these numbers is only going for this. He proved to not even be worth what they paid for him. Morrison for Tampa had hit 38 home runs the year before in 2017. He only hit 246, 868 OPS. That's not too bad, but again, he was a first baseman, but not a great fielding first baseman. He's not like a Gold Glove type guy down there, and it's first base. It's a fungible position for fielding. Out of all the positions on the diamond, it's one of the ones you can hide, or you don't need a Gold Glove. It's not like short or catcher or center where that really makes a difference. So he got a contract last year from Minnesota that was a $5.5 million deal, and the Twins paid $1 million this year to buy him out, because I believe that was probably a 2-year deal or whatever with $1 million team buyout, and they said, "Yep, $5.5 million, no thanks." After he went out and hit a $186 last year, and 15 home runs and a 644 OPS, and it didn't matter what he did that year before, and the market showed it. And what could you have complained he didn't get more money? I guess he could have, but as it turned out, the $5.5 million was about $5 million more than what he probably gave the Twins back in production last year. So, it's just the reality, I think, of what the market is now. Baseball's kind of changed, and maybe it's a hat. It's funny, our fantasy league, and we can kind of wrap it up with this. Our fantasy league we play in, at one point in time, we used to see salaries kind of capped out at a certain length. And then over the last few years, we've seen sort of a stars and scrubs approach where, since we're an auction baseball league, teams will pay more money for the biggest names and the biggest players, and then kind of, scrounge around to find bits and pieces with upside. And it's funny, baseball kind of maybe is doing to some extent the same thing, where your premium talent gets that type of money. And, you focus on that. You focus with your youngest guys with upside, and those guys in the middle, they're kind of fungible. It doesn't matter if I have this guy or that guy, they're all kind of the same. So I'm looking for as cheap as possible and as little hassle as possible. And that, life imitating art, perhaps real baseball may be moving towards that a little bit, which is why we see these more stagnant markets.
Yeah, I think that the teams are really looking at building from within. I mean, we saw we've seen over the last 3 or 4 years a lot of really good young talent come up, and there's only a limited number of jobs in Major League Baseball, and when you have all this talent coming up, something's got to give, and it's going to be the overpriced veteran is going to be the guy who's going to be the first one to really feel that. And I think that there's going to be more of that. I mean, as teams are really spending a lot more time on developing their talent from within and finding talent in the Caribbean and in South America, and really working. I feel like the draft has gotten so much more important. The Major League Baseball draft. There was a time when, and it wasn't that long ago, that all these drafts, all these whether it's the NBA draft or the NFL draft, they really emphasize it, right? They broadcast it. There's analysts, there's all this kind of stuff. And MLB never did that. Their draft was literally like, you needed a special invitation to even know what was going on. It was, they didn't broadcast it anywhere. They would basically put out press releases to let you know how the draft was going. And I mean, they finally are starting to, warm up to the idea of actually having a live draft and having players there. But God, they're so far behind what the Major League, what NBA and the NFL, the production that they do for their drafts. And which again shows you the problem that baseball has with marketing its game.
Yep.
It's the NBA and the NBA and the NFL understand that it's a 12-month cycle, and that they want to win every month. And so with football, it's like you have preseason starts in July, it goes into August, season starts in September through December, playoffs start in January, and go Super Bowl in February. March, you're like, we're gonna give up March because of March Madness. But starting in October or starting in April, it's our month again. Even though it's the opening of the baseball season, we're gonna have the draft during April. In May is going to be OTAs, and then it's just nonstop. It's nonstop. They literally have decided that they're gonna try to be relevant 11 out of the 12 months of the year, and baseball is basically 6 months. We have a 6-month season. We realize most people aren't really even going to pay attention to the playoffs. Let's make it a 1 month. Let's make it a 1 month window that we're really trying to capture.
Yeah.
But that's another that could be a whole other podcast of how, all the shortcomings of Major League Baseball.
Well, we will in a future podcast. We will be talking about situations. Speaking of marketing, the great job they're doing marketing baseball in Florida. Speaking of ranting and bringing up favorite owners of mine of real life, such as people like Jeffrey Loria, we can talk about why there's no market for baseball in Florida. I don't think in the future, but that's a subject for another time.
Maybe we can do a top 10 worst owners in Major League Baseball.
Can Jeffrey Loria just be all 10 of those spots? Oh, he can be 2 because he drove 2 separate teams into the ground. So I guess he could take 2 of the top 10 spots, right? Montreal Loria.
I will remind you
Florida,
that Jeffrey Loria is the owner of 2 World Series rings. I know that drives you nuts, but it is the truth.
I can get one of those on eBay, maybe. I'll have to look when we're done and go see. I can get a Super Bowl ring on eBay. I bet you, or an NBA championship ring. I bet one of those 2 is available on eBay. Don't know about a World Series ring. It's possible,
but you didn't earn it.
Hold on. The Florida teams earned that. Jeffrey Loria earned nothing. Other than he signed the checks, and he did that probably with great reluctance, but he personally earned he earned about as much of their World Series wins as I would have earned.
When you sign the checks, you get a ring too. John Henry has 4 rings.
Different owner, different guy. Something is just wrong in the balance of karma in the universe when Jeffrey Loria makes a ton of money by selling the Marlins and profits immensely and has 2 World Series rings. And all he did was destroy that market through greed and self-serving, stupid behavior. But again, that's a subject for a lengthier time because we could go on about him for a while. But I think it's about time we probably wrap it up for the evening. We'll be back again with our next episode, where I'm not really sure where we'll go. We're probably going to talk a little bit more baseball. We have Hall of Fame voting coming up, and the Golden Globes was tonight. There was some entertainment stuff we could talk about, or who knows what will happen. Who else will be fired or cut or released between now and our next podcast? We'll certainly have some good stuff to talk about.
We do have the divisional playoffs coming up next weekend. So we'll have those picks, and we will also...
We'll have my 4 incorrect picks to go through. Yes. So I can go 0-8.
We won't have... We were mentioning this the other day when we were talking off the air, that we're not going to have a lack of things to talk about. We find a way to talk about an hour a day about just everything. So
doing a podcast should be simple. Life helps when it keeps giving us ammunition. Thank you, Cody Parkey, for giving me at least a little tonight. So
yeah, there you go.
That the silver lining? That's not a silver lining. Steve, take us out.
It is what it is. Well, thank you for listening. Follow us on Twitter, and we are located at Excruciating Podcast. If you liked what you heard, tune in again and let your friends know. And we appreciate it. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time on Excruciating Minutia.
Good night, everybody.